So, imagine winning the Nobel Peace Prize. Celebrated around the world for lifting millions out of poverty.
Yeah.
And then, picture this same person facing life in prison.
Wow.
It's pretty jarring.
Yeah.
And that's the reality for Mohammed Yunus.
Right.
You probably know him as the founder of Grameen Bank, a pioneer of microfinance. But this deep dive is about uncovering the controversies that surround him.
Okay.
Accusations of financial crimes, a tense standoff with the Prime Minister of Bangladesh,
Oh, wow.
and what it means for the entire country's political landscape.
Yeah.
So we've got a stack of articles and reports here ready to kind of unpack the key facts and help you understand what's really going on.
It's it's a fascinating story because
Yeah.
Yunus's work with Grameen Bank wasn't just about giving out small loans. It ignited a global movement.
Yeah.
Microfinance represents now an estimated $200 billion industry. But that's where things get complicated. This massive growth has sparked intense debate about its real impact on poverty.
So before we dive into the controversy, can we just break down microfinance? What are the arguments for and against it as a successful poverty reduction strategy?
Absolutely. At its core, microfinance aims to empower people, particularly women who lack access to traditional banking systems.
Right.
Grameen Bank, for instance, provides small loans to help people start businesses, generate income.
Yeah.
Supporters point to the millions who've used these loans to climb out of poverty, boosting their income, strengthening communities.
Yeah.
And some studies have even shown positive impacts on education and health outcomes as well.
So there is real evidence that microfinance can make a difference.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing it's not a perfect solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the criticisms?
The main criticism is that microfinance can trap borrowers in a cycle of debt. Critics argue that, interest rates, even if they're relatively low, can still be a burden for people living on the margins. And if a business fails, the loan can become an unbearable weight, pushing families deeper into poverty.
Wow.
There's also the argument that focusing just on individual loans ignores the systemic issues that contribute to poverty in the first place.
I see.
Lack of infrastructure,
Yeah.
education, things like that.
So it sounds like a nuanced picture.
Yeah.
It's not just about handing out money. It's about creating a sustainable system where loans are truly empowering and not a source of added hardship. And that's where the story of Yunus and Grameen Bank takes a turn.
Exactly.
He wasn't just facing critiques of microfinance, but personal and political challenges as well.
Exactly. The controversy surrounding Yunus goes beyond debates about the effectiveness of microfinance.
Okay.
It becomes intertwined with Bangladesh's political landscape, specifically his relationship with Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina.
Right.
It's a relationship that has been strained for years, reaching a boiling point around 2011 when Yunus was removed from Grameen Bank.
Wait, so the founder of Grameen Bank was pushed out of his own organization? Yeah. How did that happen?
Officially, it was about a mandatory retirement age law.
Okay.
Yunus had exceeded the age limit for the position. However, many saw this as a pretext, a convenient way for the government to remove Yunus from a position of power.
I see. So it wasn't just about age. It was about Yunus's influence.
Right.
Can you help us understand the political context here?
Mm-hmm.
Why would removing Yunus be seen as beneficial to the government?
Well, Yunus, with his Nobel Peace Prize and global recognition, was a powerful figure in Bangladesh, potentially even a political rival to Hasina.
Wow.
He was popular, respected, known for his integrity. Some speculate that Hasina viewed him as a threat, especially after Yunus explored the possibility of forming his own political party. Removing him from Grameen Bank could be seen as a way to limit his influence and consolidate power.
So it started to feel like a power struggle.
Yeah.
You have Yunus, this internationally celebrated figure, pushing for social change through economic empowerment. And then you have the government potentially seeing that influence as a challenge to their authority.
It's a complex dynamic. Remember, Grameen Bank had become a major institution in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about loans, it was about social change, about challenging traditional power structures.
Yeah.
Yunus's removal from the bank marked a turning point, and unfortunately, things were about to escalate dramatically.
From what I've read, the situation took a sharp turn in 2024 with some serious accusations against Yunus.
Yeah.
Could you walk us through what happened?
In January of 2024, Yunus was convicted for violating labor laws, a decision that he is appealing.
Okay.
But the real bombshell came later. with a series of far more serious charges.
What kind of charges are we talking about?
We're talking embezzlement, money laundering, forgery.
Wow.
These are accusations with potential penalties that could lead to life imprisonment.
Wow.
The government maintains it's simply following legal procedures,
Yeah.
that no one is above the law. But Yunus and his supporters claim these charges are politically motivated, aimed at silencing him and dismantling his legacy.
It's a stark contrast.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you have these allegations of financial wrongdoing,
Right.
but on the other, there's this history of groundbreaking work and a global reputation for integrity. It's hard to reconcile the two.
It's precisely this clash of narratives that makes this situation so compelling.
Right.
It forces us to grapple with the complexity of evidence, the potential for political manipulation, and the very real human consequences at stake.
And this is all happening against a backdrop of increasing concern about the state of democracy in Bangladesh. Is that right?
That's a key element here. There are growing concerns about a crackdown on dissent,
Yeah.
with Yunus's case seen as a prime example.
Right.
Critics of the government argue that these charges are part of a larger pattern of silencing opposition voices.
That's where I think we need to unpack the occupation incident.
Oh.
It seems like a pivotal moment in this story. Can you
Okay.
describe what happened and why it was so significant?
It was a dramatic escalation. In February 2024, Yunus's office building was occupied by individuals who appeared to be affiliated with the government.
Oh, wow.
They locked out staff, allegedly harassed employees, and effectively took control of the building.
Wow.
Yunus described it as a personal attack, a clear attempt to intimidate him.
I can see why that will be interpreted as a direct threat.
Yeah.
What was the government's response to this incident?
Grameen Bank downplayed the incident, denying a forceful occupation. But the imagery of Yunus's office being taken over sent shockwaves through Bangladesh and the international community.
Okay. So we've got this dramatic incident, accusations of financial crimes, and this undercurrent of political tension. How did the global community react to all of this?
It's been interesting to see the international response. Yunus has garnered immense support globally.
Yeah.
Over 200 prominent figures, including Nobel laureates, celebrities, and human rights advocates, have spoken out in defense of Yunus. They've condemned the charges, highlighting his contributions to poverty alleviation and raising concerns about the erosion of democratic principles in Bangladesh.
Can you give us some examples of this international support and what they're saying?
One of the most vocal supporters has been Vinod Khosla, a well-known venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. He's praised Yunus's work, vouching for his integrity, highlighting the positive impact of microfinance on millions of lives.
Yeah.
Then you have Kerry Kennedy,
Okay.
a prominent human rights attorney, who has gone a step further, warning about the broader crackdown on dissent in Bangladesh.
Right.
She sees the charges against Yunus as a chilling example of how the government is silencing critics and undermining democratic values.
So you have these powerful voices on the world stage raising the alarm about what's happening in Bangladesh.
Yeah,
But does that kind of pressure actually influence anything?
it's a good question.
Can it impact the outcome of the trial or change the political course of a country?
That's a critical question and one we need to explore further. We'll dive into the potential impact of international pressure, the likely scenarios for Yunus's case, and the broader implications for Bangladesh's future in the next part of our deep dive.
It's incredible how much this case has resonated globally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not every day that you see Nobel laureates and celebrities rallying around someone accused of serious financial crimes.
It speaks to the power of Yunus's story, I think, and the respect that he's earned over decades of fighting poverty.
Yeah.
But it also raises the question, how much can international pressure really achieve?
Yeah.
Can it sway the course of justice in another country?
That's what I'm curious about.
Right.
Bangladesh isn't some isolated nation. It's a key player in South Asia. Strong economic and political ties around the world. Does that make them more sensitive to international criticism?
It's definitely a factor.
Yeah.
Bangladesh relies heavily on foreign aid and investment. And its reputation on the global stage matters. Negative press, condemnation from influential figures
Yeah.
can impact those relationships.
So if countries start pulling back on aid or investors get spooked,
Yeah,
that could put real pressure on the government.
precisely.
Yeah.
There's also the potential impact on Bangladesh's garment industry,
Right.
which is a major driver of its economy.
Yeah.
Many international brands source their clothing from Bangladesh,
Huh?
and they're increasingly sensitive to issues of labor rights and human rights.
Okay.
If there's a perception that Bangladesh is backsliding on those fronts, it could hurt their exports.
It sounds like the economic consequences could be significant.
Right.
But beyond economics, is there any evidence that international pressure can actually lead to changes in a country's behavior, especially when it comes to, political issues like this?
There are certainly examples where international pressure has played a role in pushing governments toward reform.
Uh-huh.
Think about the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa
Right.
or the movement for democracy in Myanmar. In both cases, sustained international pressure,
Yeah.
including sanctions and boycotts,
Right.
contributed to significant political change.
So it's not just about words, it's about actions that have real consequences.
Exactly. And it's often a combination of factors: economic pressure, diplomatic efforts, public campaigns, and support for civil society organizations within the country.
That makes sense. But I'm also wondering about the potential downsides of international pressure. Could it backfire?
Right.
Could it make the government more defensive, less likely to compromise?
That's a valid concern. If a government feels like it's being bullied or dictated to,
Yeah.
it can trigger nationalist sentiments and a hardening of positions.
Right.
There's always a risk that external pressure could be perceived as interference in internal affairs,
I see.
leading to a backlash.
So it's a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
You want to apply enough pressure to encourage change,
Right.
but not so much that it creates the opposite effect.
And that's where diplomacy and strategic engagement become crucial. It's about building coalitions, working with international organizations,
Yeah.
finding ways to incentivize positive change rather than simply resorting to punitive measures.
So it's not just about shouting from the rooftops, it's about working behind the scenes to
Right.
try to influence the situation.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that change rarely happens overnight.
Yeah.
It's often a long and arduous process, requiring patience, persistence, and a willingness to work with a variety of actors.
All right, so let's bring this back to Yunus and his current situation. We've got these serious charges against him, a trial underway,
Yeah.
and intense international scrutiny. What are the possible scenarios here? What are the potential outcomes of this case?
Well, the most obvious scenario is that Yunus is found guilty on
Yeah.
some or all of the charges. Given the severity of the accusations,
Right.
this could result in a lengthy prison sentence,
Yeah.
potentially even life imprisonment.
That would be a devastating outcome. Not just for Yunus personally, but for his legacy and for the future of social entrepreneurship in Bangladesh.
It would undoubtedly send shockwaves through the country and the international community. It would raise serious concerns about the fairness of the judicial system in Bangladesh and fuel further accusations of political persecution.
And what about the impact on the microfinance movement globally?
Right.
Could this case taint the entire industry?
It's hard to say for sure, but it could certainly cast a shadow over microfinance.
Yeah.
Critics might seize on this case to argue that the entire model is flawed, that it's inherently exploitative or prone to corruption.
Wow.
It could lead to increased scrutiny and regulation of the industry, potentially hindering its growth and impact.
So that's one possible scenario. Yunus is convicted, which has repercussions for him, for Bangladesh, and for the global microfinance movement. What are the other possibilities?
Another scenario is that Yunus is acquitted of all charges. This would be a major victory for him and his supporters,
Right.
reinforcing their claims of political motivation behind the accusations.
Uh-huh.
It would be a powerful rebuke of the government's actions and could potentially strengthen the movement for democratic reforms in Bangladesh.
That would be a dramatic turn of events.
Yeah.
But even if he's acquitted, wouldn't the damage to his reputation already be done?
Right.
I mean, just being accused of these crimes can have a lasting impact, regardless of the verdict.
That's true. The accusations themselves have tarnished his image, and the trial, regardless of the outcome, has consumed years of his life and energy.
Right.
Even if he's cleared of all charges, it will be a long road to rebuilding his reputation and restoring public trust.
So it's not a simple win-or-lose situation.
Right.
Even if he's acquitted, there are still consequences.
Right.
Are there any other scenarios we should consider?
There's also the possibility of a more nuanced outcome. Perhaps he's convicted on some of the lesser charges, resulting in a shorter sentence, or even a fine. Or maybe the government reaches a plea deal with Yunus, dropping some of the charges in exchange for certain concessions.
What kind of concessions would the government be looking for?
It's hard to speculate, but it could involve Yunus stepping back from public life, refraining from criticizing the government,
Right.
or even leaving the country.
Wow.
These kinds of compromises might be seen as a face-saving measure for both sides,
Right.
allowing the government to claim a victory
Mm-hmm.
while avoiding the backlash of a harsh sentence for Yunus.
So it's a complex web of possibilities,
Yeah.
each with its own set of consequences.
Right.
But ultimately, the question remains,
Yeah.
what does all of this mean for Bangladesh?
Yeah.
How will this case impact the country's political trajectory
Right.
and its standing in the world?
Right. That's the crucial question, and one we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. We'll delve into the potential impact on Bangladesh's democracy, its economy, and its relationship with the international community, and we'll consider the broader implications for the role of social entrepreneurship and the power of individuals to challenge entrenched systems.
It feels like this whole situation is a test for Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Can they uphold the rule of law
Right.
while also respecting the rights of individuals to dissent? It's
It is.
it's a delicate balance, especially when you're dealing with someone as influential as Yunus.
It's a critical juncture for Bangladesh. This case has exposed fault lines in their democracy,
Yep.
highlighting concerns about, the concentration of power,
Right.
limitations on freedom of speech, and independence of the judiciary.
And all of this is happening against the backdrop of a global shift
Right.
towards more authoritarian forms of government. We're seeing democratic institutions being eroded in many parts of the world.
Yeah.
So this case feels even more significant.
Absolutely. The outcome of Yunus's trial will be closely watched by other countries, particularly those struggling with similar challenges.
Right.
It could embolden authoritarian leaders
Oh, wow.
if they see that someone like Yunus can be silenced without significant repercussions.
So there's a lot more at stake here than just the fate of one man.
Yeah.
It's about the future of democracy and human rights,
Right.
not just in Bangladesh, but potentially in the region and beyond.
And it's important to remember that these issues are interconnected.
Yeah.
The erosion of democratic values often goes hand in hand with economic inequality and social unrest.
Right.
When people feel like they don't have a voice,
Yeah.
when they see corruption and injustice going unpunished,
Yeah.
it creates fertile ground for instability.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So if Yunus is convicted, and especially if he receives a harsh sentence,
Yeah.
it could fuel further discontent within Bangladesh.
Right.
It could also damage the country's reputation on the world stage, potentially leading to economic consequences as well.
Precisely. Foreign investors might be hesitant to put money into a country where the rule of law is perceived to be weak.
Yeah.
International aid organizations might reevaluate their programs,
Right.
and consumers might think twice about buying products made in Bangladesh if they're concerned about human rights violations.
It paints a rather bleak picture.
Yeah.
But what if Yunus is acquitted? Would that change things?
Yeah.
Would it signal a commitment to democratic values and restore Bangladesh's reputation?
It would definitely be a positive step.
Okay.
An acquittal would signal that the judiciary can operate independently
Right.
and that the government is willing to respect due process, even when it involves a prominent critic.
But even in that scenario, wouldn't there still be lingering doubts? I mean, the fact that these charges were brought in the first place,
Sure.
the way the case has been handled, it raises questions about the motivations and the fairness of the process.
That's true. Rebuilding trust takes time. Even if Yunus is acquitted, the government would need to take concrete steps to demonstrate its commitment to transparency and accountability.
Right.
They would need to address concerns about restrictions on freedom of speech and ensure that civil society organizations can operate freely without fear of reprisal.
So it's not just about the verdict, it's about the broader political context.
Right.
Even if Yunus wins this legal battle, the fight for a more democratic and just Bangladesh will continue.
Exactly. And this case has shown the power of collective action.
Mm-hmm.
The international outcry, the support from civil society groups,
Oh.
the tireless efforts of Yunus's legal team, all of these factors have played a role in keeping the pressure on the government
Right.
and ensuring that this case remains in the spotlight.
It's a reminder that we can't just be passive observers.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility to speak out against injustice,
Right.
to support those who are fighting for a better world, and to hold those in power accountable.
Well said. And it's not just about grand gestures.
Yeah.
It's about the everyday choices we make, who we support with our purchases, what information we consume, how we engage in our communities.
Right.
These small actions, when multiplied across millions of people, can create a powerful force for change.
So for you listening, as you process this complex situation,
Yeah.
consider this. What can you do in your own sphere of influence to promote justice?
Right.
to support those who are working to empower the most vulnerable and to uphold the values of democracy and human rights? These are the questions that Yunus's story leaves us with, and they're questions worth pondering.